Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire of 70 million people during a plague that killed millions. He had more reasons to be anxious than any human alive. And yet, his private journal reveals a mind of extraordinary calm, not because he was born calm, but because he practiced 4 specific techniques every single day that dismantled anxiety before it could take hold. Here's exactly how he did it, and why every single technique still works today. Let's dispel a myth right away. Marcus Aurelius was not a naturally peaceful man living a serene life. He was a man who struggled with his own mind constantly, and the meditations prove it. You don't write 12 books of private self-instruction if you're already at peace. The meditations are not the reflections of someone who has it figured out. They're the working notes of someone who is trying, in real time, to keep his mind from spiraling. Marcus worried about his generals. He worried about the plague consuming his soldiers. He watched friends die. He carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders, and some nights, by his own admission, that weight felt unbearable. This is what makes his anxiety techniques credible. He didn't develop them from comfort. He developed them in a military tent on the Danube frontier, surrounded by death. These weren't theoretical exercises. They were survival tools. The first and most powerful technique is radical present focus. Marcus writes in Book 12, "Confine yourself to the present. Think about what actually makes you anxious. It is almost never what's happening right now in this exact moment. It's what might happen tomorrow, next week, next year, the diagnosis you're waiting for, the conversation you're rehearsing, the future you can't control and can't predict." Marcus recognized this pattern in himself. He wrote that the mind creates phantom enemies by projecting itself into a future that doesn't exist yet, and then it suffers from those projections as if they were real. You are, in his words, disturbed not by the thing itself, but by your anticipation of the thing. His solution was surgical. Cut the timeline. When anxiety begins to spiral, refuse to think about next month. Refuse to think about next week. Shrink your entire time horizon to this hour. This task, this breath, Marcus wrote, never let the future disturb you. You will meet it if you have to with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. In other words, future you will handle future problems. Present you only needs to handle what is directly in front of you. And what is directly in front of you is almost always manageable. The anxiety lives in the gap between now and then. Close the gap and the anxiety has nowhere to stand. When shrinking the time horizon doesn't work, Marcus went the other direction. He zoomed out, way out. In several passages throughout the meditations, Marcus describes a mental exercise where he imagines looking down on the earth from above. He pictures entire civilizations rising and falling, armies marching and dissolving into dust, emperors who were worshipped as gods now completely forgotten. And then he asks, where does my problem fit in this picture? He writes in Book 6, Asia and Europe are corners of the world, all the ocean is a drop in the universe, Mount Athos is a clod of earth, the whole of the present is a point in eternity, all things are tiny, changeable, vanishing. This isn't nihilism. He's not saying nothing matters. He's calibrating. He's giving his problem its actual size instead of the size his anxious mind assigned to it. Because anxiety is, at its core, a distortion of proportion. It takes something small and makes it feel enormous. It takes something uncertain and makes it feel catastrophic. The cosmic perspective reverses that distortion. It doesn't eliminate the problem. It right-sizes it. And a right-sized problem is one you can handle. Marcus's third technique is deceptively simple. When you're anxious, name the thing you're afraid of, specifically, in exact terms. This works because vague fears grow and specific fears shrink. As long as the anxiety lives as a cloud of unnamed dread in your chest, it's enormous. It fills every corner of your mind. It feels infinite because it has no edges. But the moment you write it down, the moment you force yourself to finish the sentence, I am afraid that, something shifts. The fear acquires a shape, and shapes have limits. A fear with edges is a fear you can evaluate. I'm afraid I'll lose my job. Okay, what's the actual probability? What would you do if it happened? Have you survived job loss before? Is it the end of everything, or is it a setback with a recovery path? I am afraid this relationship is ending. Okay, what evidence supports that? What evidence contradicts it? If it did end, what would the next year actually look like? Marcus practiced this constantly. He would take a fear that felt overwhelming and reduce it to its factual components. What specifically am I afraid of? What is the worst realistic outcome? Can I survive that outcome? The answer was almost always yes. And that yes, arrived at through specificity rather than avoidance, dissolved the anxiety in a way that distraction never could. The fourth technique sounds counterintuitive. When you're anxious about something going wrong, deliberately imagine it going wrong. In full detail, on purpose. This is premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils applied specifically to anxiety. Marcus didn't just prepare for difficult people in the morning. He prepared for the worst possible outcomes of the things he cared about most. What if the campaign fails? What if the plague spreads further? What if my son doesn't become the leader I hope he will? Marcus sat with these questions instead of running from them. He imagined the worst in detail, and then he asked, if this happens, how will I respond? Who will I be? The paradox is that imagining the worst makes you less anxious, not more, because anxiety feeds on uncertainty. It's the not knowing that tortures you. Once you've looked the worst case in the face, the uncertainty shrinks. The fear loses its mystery, and you realize you could survive it. It would be painful, it would be hard, but you would endure. Marcus built this into his daily practice, and when bad things actually happened, he was ready, not because he could prevent them, but because he had already met them in his mind and decided who he would be when they arrived. What's striking about all four of these techniques is that modern cognitive behavioral therapy uses nearly identical methods. Present focus is a core mindfulness technique used in anxiety treatment. Cognitive distancing, the act of zooming out from your thoughts and observing them rather than being consumed by them, is a standard CBT tool. Specificity, writing down your fears and evaluating their probability, is the basis of the cognitive restructuring worksheets used in clinical settings worldwide. Marcus Aurelius developed a complete anxiety toolkit 18 centuries before any of these techniques had clinical names. He did it through trial and error, writing by candlelight. And the fact that modern science independently arrived at the same conclusions tells you everything about how well these methods work. Here's your challenge. The next time anxious thoughts begin to spiral, pick up a pen and complete this sentence. Right now, in this exact moment, I am. Fill in only what is literally physically true. I am sitting at my desk. I am breathing. I am holding a pen. Not what might happen, not what others think, not the story your mind is spinning, just what is. Then write this sentence. The specific thing I am afraid of is. Force yourself to finish it. Give the fear a name, give it edges, and then look at it on paper. You'll find that the thing with edges is always smaller than the nameless cloud it was a moment ago. Marcus knew this. Your therapist knows this. And now you know it too. Marcus Aurelius had more reasons to be anxious than you or I will ever have. An empire collapsing, a plague without cure, generals plotting, children dying. And yet his journal reads like the notes of a man in control of his own mind. Not because the world cooperated, but because he built four tools that worked regardless of what the world did. Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. If this changed how you think about anxiety, Subscribe for more ancient wisdom that still works today. Drop a comment telling me which technique you're going to try first. I read every single one.